First of all, thanks to Faye who invited me here. She has been like a mother for me, and she has special motherly quality that not all mothers have, in fact few mothers have, and perhaps some of you have some experiences with it, but her quality is that she can keep the boys, the grown-up boys in the family, to fight each other out of the ring. And it's a great thing. Now, the main point is that I'm a researcher. And a researcher wants to know how things work, why things work, and whether they work, and particularly what happens when they fail. I mean, that is the point of being a researcher. And now anybody can call himself a researcher, isn't it? So you have to prove something, you have to provide some proof, and I will. This is a special moment, and I want to compare them to two other special moments in the past. First, the Supreme Court verdict, when I had helped a 50-year-old social worker without any illness, who had lost all that made her life worth living, and whom I provided with lethal pills, which at the time was in the Netherlands an outrage, as people should have an illness, and she hadn't, apart from what some call a psychiatric illness. So that was, the court verdicted that I was guilty without punishment. So that was a complicated case, and I will not go into it. Then the other special moment is that since the court the verdict of the Supreme Court has put me on the track of finding out how this peaceful, effective death could be accomplished without the help of someone like me, like a doctor. So a demedicalized approach has since 1996 been my focus. And that resulted in my Dutch PhD thesis on stopping eating and drinking, and medication methods in use in the Netherlands far more frequently than anyone had expected. Well, if you do research, you have to publish it. Otherwise, you are a self-acclaimed researcher. But I offered the results to a peer-reviewed international scientific journal, Social Science and Medicine, the interface of medicine and social science. And have a look at the title, because that gives in a nutshell the core of all my work. It's a self-directed dying, and then the core point is attended by proxies. Proxies, of course, can be relatives, they can be nurses, they can be friends, but I had set up my research so that I could not find suicides that had been alone. Only those who died attended by a or more proxy were involved in my research. Let's leave it at that. This is what I've been working on for years and now is available in English. I call this a quartet. 2 DVDs, left up and right down, top, and the 2 books. I'm not sure you can read the titles, so I have to read them aloud. The left top in the quartet, I call this the first violin. You know, the first violin gives it the pace and is the central piece in the quartet. And the film is called Eyewitnesses, Personal Narratives about self-chosen and humane death. I'll show you in a moment a very brief part of it, but let me first go to the right. I skipped one important point. The films are understandable, are made for lay people and can be understood without reading the books, just like the books can be understood without seeing the films. So what is the point then to call the eyewitnesses film the first violin? Well, these films are made for lay people. Many doctors are lay people in this field as well. And it is made for lay people to identify with the persons in the film, to see how they dealt with either their own death or the death of a dear one. Once you have seen that film, which comprises an introduction, we'll see a few minutes from that, and then 4 other pieces. A widow relating the death of her husband with pentobarbital, a niece relating the death by helium of her old aunt, and a daughter relating the death of her father, her old Parkinson-stricken father, by stopping eating and drinking, and the last one, a doctor who had never provided assisted dying to an Alzheimer patient. He tells how in the first and hopefully the last time in his life he did that. Okay, so it's a film made for instruction and for lay people who can fully understand it without any instruction. Let me first show you this 2.5 minutes. Please, for most people in this room, nothing new is in it. I would ask you to judge this film on the merits that it is meant. I mean, the merit is that lay people who come and ask, well, my mother is in pain, or I want to find out what the ways are, this ill or old person should be able to understand. And the 2.5 minutes that you're going to see give an illustration how we go about. There were 4 eyewitnesses in the film, and this is the introductory part by an actress who, when she was in the film, when we were filming her, she was involved in getting the medicines because that was her chosen way. She was very involved with the subject, and I understand you can see this. I hope you can see this. Pascal? The film doesn't show up. Which it would be necessary, and I've put them together in the 6th slide. Help me, please, through the 6th slide. This one, yes, we're there. And from now on, no films, so it should work. I needed an acronym because I came up after having consulted Nietzsche's book very thoroughly. He gives us 5 criteria in his Peaceful Pill Handbook, and I have made from them 4 of them overlap with Nietzsche, but some are different. So the first and most important for me is safe for those present. If a self-chosen death should be attended by someone, by proxies, has the man left this? It's again. Safe for others present, of course effective, of course death would come while asleep, and availability is one of the criteria. Then something I have put very much stress on, and others haven't, responsibility. One should perform the acts that cause death oneself. Without the lethal acts, there should be no injury, no brain damage in case of failure, and For Australia, with a very tough legal system, the last one is important. In the Netherlands, detection prevention is not that important. So in the book, the medication methods and the helium method that conform to these criteria are in the first part, and then in a chapter called The Search for the Holy Grail, I included those methods that pop up in the Right to Die literature that sometimes are not, well, there's a discussion about, but I feel they are not conforming to the Caesaride criteria. Next slide. In my book, I point to open issues in do-it-yourself methods. And I'll note 5. Here you see 4, the 5th one will come up shortly. If there are questions about it, but the important thing is that for each of these open issues, potassium chloride, could that be used in a suppositorium? Well, it could, but it wouldn't be effective. And that's the point I got from my pharmacists and toxicologist advisors. Nicotine is very effective. You can easily extract nicotine from tobacco in a high concentration. But it has disadvantages, and the main disadvantage is that, as far as I know, it has never been used. So I wouldn't advise nicotine, but it conforms to the effectiveness criterion, and it would be safe for others present. Carbon monoxide definitely would not be safe for those present, and I've come across in the literature of no method that makes it safe, really safe for those present. Then the compression method. If you oppress the arteries high in the neck without obstructing the windpipe, then that should take away consciousness in a few minutes, and death should follow. So I deal with that method in detail. I have a point of view on all these points, but I give them to what I feel is lacking nowadays, the culture of debate among experts in the right to die. Once every 2 years, a conference like this, how stimulating and useful it may be, that is not enough for an ongoing culture of debate among experts, or insiders if you want to. For instance, there is more need for advice by toxicologists and pharmacists. Let me give you an example that pharmacists differ of opinion. The ones I consulted say the Drion pill, a pill that is lethal in itself, will never come about. It's impossible. And yesterday I heard the NVVA, Petra de Jong, saying, well, in 1 or 2 years, our experts say it will be there. So that's an interesting point for debate, I would say. So hopefully they are here, and they will get onto an exchange with my experts. Another point, I think there is far too little information exchange about the pharmaceutical providers. Nietzsche has done a great job here. He should be credited for that. And we're grateful in the Netherlands, the Horizon uses his information. But this is a field that can be developed so quickly, and we need to test it. So right to die groups should have a sort of central information point on this and exchange that with right to die groups in other countries. Well, I'm always collecting reports about failures and analysis. This has been most helpful. And I publish these failures and their analysis on my website in Dutch. Unfortunately, I'm not able to publish them in English yet. I hope so in the future, or someone else might help me to do that. But this is part of the culture of debate. that failure should be analyzed and published for lay people and insiders alike. So I feel there is a lot to win here. Last slide, there's new light shed on do-it-yourself method in A Way to Die. There's no time to discuss them all, but let me say that chloroquine really conforms to the standards that Dick Cote and Dirk has set. Chloroquine is available in many countries without a prescription. Chloroquine is very cheap, and chloroquine is very effective in a humane way if used together with the right amount of 2 types of benzodiazepines, sleeping pills in ordinary language. So it's a demedicalized, cheap, available route that some call a risky method. Since my contacts in Germany with Dr. Christian Huber-Arnold was publicly been doing this, we have collected evidence on over 50 cases of the dose 17.5 grams of chloroquine sulfate with 500 milligrams diazepam and 100 milligrams of midazolam. And it's always been effective. Death followed within 2 hours. Apart from those reports from Germany, they conform to the reports I got from the foundation, the Horizon. We have not 50 there, but they have been always effective. So it's not a risky drug anymore now that we know how to combine it with the good amount of sleeping pills. Then there's new light shed on the plastic bag method in my book. You should realize that reports on a plastic bag test, of course there are reports how someone has been found dead with a bag around the neck, and so it seems effective. Well, it seems, and sometimes it is effective. But what has never been published, well, only incidental reports about failures. But when I started to research this subject, I came about failure on failure. But these people who fail and who awake after 10, 20 hours, they are ashamed. They won't come step forward and say, here I am, I failed the plastic bag method, because I'm a failure anyway. That's why I want to live, don't want to live anymore. So the problem is that our data are incomplete. It's very hard to get the failures above the table. Successes are more often reported with all the emotions. But then even if there is a success, the cause of success in my research sometimes is by assistance, which is kept secret. In my interviews, I came across 2 such cases. People, one is a mother with a psychiatric daughter who, after many, many years of failed treatment, helped her daughter to die. The daughter used sleeping pills and the plastic bag. But when the mother came to look at her, she wasn't dead because she had been struggling and the bag had moved aside. So she was in deep sleep. And then the mother took the most difficult decision in her life. She placed the bag back on the neck and held it there till her daughter was dead. And the other example is for the husband. He did the same for his spouse. And I was the first. The police, they were investigated. The police had to report to the police, but they had kept it secret. And I was the first, many years after the day, in an confidential, in-depth interview, that I saw at the emotion that there was something hidden, and I probed further, and then this came out. Then there is a famous case in the Netherlands that death is not caused by hypoxia in a case of plastic bag with sleeping pills, but with a non-benzodiazepine, a rarely prescribed sleeping pill. And there was a police investigation, it became a court case, and therefore there was a post-mortem, and the post-mortem revealed that death had been there only 1.5 hours or more after the plastic bag had been put in place, so it's not hypoxia. And the level of the sleeping pills was mentioned as the probable cause of death. So my conclusion is that there is an imbalance between reports of success and failure, and the data are incomplete. And in the few data that I feel are reliable, 1 in 3 cases of the plastic bag method was successful, and in 2 in 3 it failed. So now my understanding that I've said for a successful scissor-read criteria kind of method is that it is successful in 90% of more cases. So unless I have evidence for that, I won't publish it as an effective method. So here we are back, and I think the discussion should start, or the questions. Let me only draw attention to the last line in this slide. I think an important new point in my book is the stress on video recording of the last acts that caused the deaths. I know in the Farwell Foundation in Canada, this has been standard practice for some time, and we have exchanged how to, well, best to do it. And I've, in my second edition of the book A Way to Die, I have included, do take recordings of sessions in which the person explains to someone, a relative, why he wants or she wants to die. So you have recordings in the preparatory phase, and you have recording in the final phase that someone, performs the last acts. In helium, the 2 last acts are turning the tap on the tank and putting the bag full of helium over the face. If someone does that himself, and in medication, of course, eating the medication. That's it. Questions, please. Faye tells me 3 minutes, so urgent. Yeah.
You had a slide of the video and the book and another video.
Oh yeah.
What were the other 3? You only told us about the first 5.
Well, you want to see that slide again, so, but somehow. Eyewitnesses film, helium method film, stopping eating, drinking, and A Way to Die. That's 4. Other questions?
Let's go back to nicotine that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned nicotine, but with although no example. With vapor cigarettes becoming popular, aqueous solutions of nicotine are becoming readily available. Is that an area that is worthy of research?
It is worthy of research. It definitely is. What I've been told by my expert advisors is that if you drink nicotine, it is so filthy, the taste, that you will start vomiting. Now, of course, we counter vomiting by antiemetics, and you could take fast-acting and long-acting benzodiazepines just before you drank it, so you fall into, within a few minutes, into a deep sleep, and you will suffer the stomach cramps briefly. But what my experts fear, but no one has tested it, is that even if you've taken antiemetics and you're in a deep sleep, such an amount of nicotine may still cause the stomach to vomit. And of course then, well, it fails. It is worthy serious attention because it's highly lethal.
Now, would you comment on tricyclics? Tricyclics, please.
Yes. I wish I had it. Yeah, tricyclics for the others. No. Well, you remember I put chloroquine on top, and then I discussed the plastic bag, and the others immediately below were the tricyclic antidepressants, which are cheap, easily available. And the reason I put them on third is that we have less reports than with chloroquine. With chloroquine I'm so certain because I have reports from several sources, which I really probed into. But with tricyclics, what we know is that the toxicologists say it is highly lethal if you use 7.5 grams together with, of course, sleeping pills. It is very lethal. But people who died that way have not been analyzed. I have no detailed reports. And if I have no detailed reports, because of the authority of the toxicological literature, I must mention them, because they think it's equally effective as chloroquine. But, I wish there were more reports. But nowadays, they are not likely to come forward, because in the Netherlands, the Horizon works with pentobarbital. So nobody uses chloroquine anymore, or chloroquine anymore, or the tricyclics.
It's used here.
Yeah. And have you detailed reports?
No, I don't. It's used by Compassion and Choices sometimes.
Well, I meet people from Compassion and Choices in San Diego, so that will be my first question to them. Is it possible to exchange? And I have experienced that in the past, these organizations are extremely reluctant to give. If we don't exchange, if we don't trust each other enough to exchange detailed reports.
Well, one more question. Talk about refusal of food and hydration as a method.
Well, it's the oldest method, and let me confess that it is my preferred method. If I'm going to die, and I have a choice, I will go for stopping eating and drinking. Why? Because with the proper palliative care that is detailed in the book, it is such a peaceful method that gives your relatives, my wife and my children will be with me, the chance to comfort me for about 10 days. And then I will pass away. And my GP, when I talked with him about my preference for stopping eating and drinking, he said, if you become delirious, which sometimes helps, I'll give you a low dose of haloperidol, which is an antipsychotic, which either cuts short, or if that doesn't work, I will terminally sedate you. So you need, if it doesn't work in the last days, because becoming delirious is very normal in dying people. It's so often. And if you're dehydrated, the chance is even higher. So in that situation, you need that a doctor can, because you're delirious, you're dehydrated, you have your advance directive and your proxy who says, no, he doesn't want infusion with water. He has refused that, and it's illegal to give it to him. Then there is what we call a refractory symptom, and that is an indication, a medical indication in the Netherlands for deep sedation. Yes. Yes, Peggy, please.
We live in a country.
No, we can't understand.
We live in a country, this is true of many countries, in which there are literally tens of thousands of overdose deaths a year. Unintended, unwanted, but lethal. What do we know from the research on overdose deaths, especially heroin, about the pharmacological properties of producing death? I realize that these drugs are not legal. They are, however, shall we say, widely available. This is Chicago. Go out on any street corner. The question is, what do we learn from the overdose deaths unintended in this or any country that might be useful in this other inquiry?
In the Netherlands, I couldn't get overdose statistics. I could get death statistics from the central organization of the government, but they don't give the details which drugs are used in which combination, which is essential, and you also have to know what illness has the person, because
These are young drug typically abusers who end up overdosing.
okay, but abusers who end up overdosing, that's a mess to go into as a researcher for, I mean,
That's something we might want to know about. That's the only question. Is there something we could learn there that would be useful both in preventing unwanted overdoses and perhaps in making possible wanted overdoses?
the question is, can we learn from drug abusers who die about unwanted uses of drugs? Well, someone else should answer the question, because I don't think we can learn much from that, because it's hard to get any details. Is there any researcher here who knows how to get details out of this?
Heroin overdose would be like an opiate overdose, wouldn't it?
Sorry?
Heroin overdose would be the same thing as an opiate overdose, a large dose of opiates.
I've left the topic of heroin. It is discussed in the book methadone, which is a medical drug now, and methadone is discussed because it might be available sometimes. Heroin is often, as long as it's not for medical use, heroin is cut, and it's only confusing to give information for me. And then, just one.
Well, the problem is these drugs are illegal, right? So if we fail, we could go to jail. But the other...
But pentobarbital is illegal
There
either.
is an organization in Vancouver called Insight who has been fighting our Canadian government to stay open. But they will have data, I believe, on past suicides because they are now trying to provide methadone in order to get people off the street and to get them off drugs. And I'm sure they must have data of the numbers, the huge numbers of people who have died from overdose.
Okay. There is an organization in Vancouver that has got data. It's called Insight, and they might be willing to share it. Interesting. You see, I know the lethal dose of heroin, pure heroin. That's no problem. But street heroin, I won't go into.
Over there.
Over there. Let's go.
3 minutes.
My question is very simple. I'm always surprised not to hear you talk about the lowering of the body temperature. The lowering of the body temperature as a means of death. And it's a traditional ancestral means of going up on a hill, sitting down in a warm blanket so you don't going to sleep and never waking up.
You mean in a freezing environment? Yeah. Well, I've tried to find out about that, and when I came across a few cases in which it failed, someone who was sitting with hardly any clothes in a freezing environment, but not Alaska freezing, just a cold winter night in the Netherlands. And the body produced so much heat that after 2 hours she went inside and she gave up. If you live in a real cold environment, you can try that.
We have time for one more question.
What about one of the opiates? What about one of the opiates such as oxycodone, which is so readily available?
Oxycodone is very effective if taken in the right dose, which is in my book, and the proper precautions. So that's very true. Other.
Okay, it's time for our break. Both will be around. His books are next door, and DVD